Welcome back to Serious Talk, Agentic AI. I'm Greg Banks, your host, and today we're tackling a question that keeps coming up in real conversations with business leaders and technical teams. What's the actual difference between local AI agents and cloud-hosted AI agents? And when does that matter? Because right now, agents has turned into a catch-all word. And if the terms are fuzzy, the decisions get fuzzy. Security, rollout strategy, cost, governance, and ultimately, whether you get real productivity or just more experiments. In this episode, I'm joined by Tim Harding and Gavin Franklin as we break it down clearly. Cloud-hosted agents, hybrid models, and fully local agents, and what each one unlocks. We also talk about why local agents are showing big efficiency gains for individuals, what hybrid really means in practice, and the security and change management realities that come with rolling these capabilities out inside of a business. Thanks again to Tim and Gavin for bringing the clarity, and thank you for listening and building along with us. Let's get into it. All right. Welcome back, gentlemen. Tim, Gavin, good to have you on today. It's been a couple of weeks,
Good to
Tim.
be here. Looking forward to it.
Good to be back.
All right. Today's topic feels like a vocabulary. I need to make y'all sweat, so we can have a pop quiz on vocabulary one of these weeks. We continue to have to define and redefine some terms. Just in our conversations with clients and whatnot, we hear a lot of lack of clarity, I guess is the best way of saying it, Gavin. Today, we're going to talk about the difference between local and cloud-hosted agents. I know you're going to peel a couple layers back there, but a good topic. I think this will bring a little bit more clarity. So why don't you kick us off with some definitions, Gavin?
Yeah, so just like you were saying, I feel like we have to start every conversation regarding AI nowadays with what exactly are we talking about? There's a lot of confusion and just a lot of terms being thrown around. So first off, I think it's important to point out that when we talk about agents, we're not talking about AI. We're not really talking about the LLMs, the brains behind the operation, right? So with LLMs, you really have a couple different options. You can utilize an existing service LLM like you see with Claude, like you see with ChatGPT, or you can host your own. There are some open source LLMs out there. That's an option. So LLMs have their own capabilities of being self-hosted versus non-self-hosted. Agents, though, are really the framework around the LLMs. It's a framework that is showing the LLM how to interact, what they can interact with, and the rules you're giving it. So that can also be something that lives locally, or it can be something that lives within a SaaS platform potentially, or even your own framework that may be non-local.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the reasons we think this is such a key topic to talk about is you hear the conversation a lot about local versus cloud-hosted LLMs. You don't hear the conversation as much around like local AI agents versus cloud-hosted AI agents. And then the other thing is we're trying to tailor our discussions here for business leaders trying to make decisions. So one of the areas where we're seeing some of the biggest productivity gains is in locally hosted AI agents using a hybrid model where maybe it's cloud hosted for the LLM, but local for the agent. You have some major unlocks in terms of capabilities you get by doing this approach, which is kind of why we wanted to dive into it today and why we're really excited about it. Not only are we seeing these productivity gains like with clients, but this is also where we've seen some of the biggest productivity gains internally at our own company as well, releasing AI agents across our entire business and across all of our teams. So really excited to kind of dive into this one. And so with that, I think there's kind of three different kind of, it's not really black and white, right? It's kind of a spectrum because you have so many different applications and pieces of the tech stack that an AI agent can use. So when you're talking about AI agents, it kind of goes on a spectrum from, a fully locally hosted AI agent all the way over to a fully cloud hosted agent. And I think what we'll do today is kind of walk through and kind of bucket them into three groups: locally hosted AI agents, hybrid hosted agents, and then cloud hosted agents. You could almost picture it as like a visual or a mental Venn diagram where there's some overlap between both of those.
Yeah. And to clarify, Tim did a great job of painting a picture, but we have a real picture that's in an artifact that will follow this episode to help you out. So.
Yep, definitely. Absolutely. So let's maybe start with the most familiar one, Gavin, cloud hosted, and kind of work our way back to locally hosted, because that might be the least familiar in terms of AI agent approaches for people. And So kind of give a rundown. What does it mean for a cloud hosted agent? What does that look like?
Yeah, so cloud hosted agents today are really what's dominating the conversation. So it's taking up the bulk share, I would even argue, of the business to business of revenue that you're seeing agents produce. And really what cloud hosted looks like for most people is SaaS-centered agents. So a lot of people have platforms. A really good example, one that we work in a lot, is Salesforce. Agentforce is the example of their cloud hosted agent infrastructure. So what that means is you're going to be working on that framework, whatever the Agentforce framework is. We've seen frameworks be utilized in 𝗟𝗏 We've seen frameworks being utilized, other ETL tools and ERP systems even. Over the course of the next couple of years, I think we're going to continue to see a trend of these SaaS platforms producing their own agents to work with data in the cloud in that system. So that's one option that you see as a cloud hosted option. You could also do it on your own framework. This is something we're seeing more and more people develop, this idea of if your data is across systems and you want to be able to manipulate that data in a centralized location with agents that you control within your own framework. This is something that we've seen success with as well. So that it can also be cloud hosted at a service like Amazon Web Services, GCP. And really you just treat that almost like an API endpoint. And that just kind of triggers or interacts with the agent from there. You also see cloud hosted agents are typically ones that are very scoped to handle a business case or task. So most of the pitches that you're going to see for a lot of these tools are going to say something like, we're going to help you with your lead pipeline, and specifically a portion of your lead pipeline. We're going to help you get information about your accounts that is external to the system you're in, or perhaps even into your entire framework, right? So your scoping is very detailed to one business process. Your memory and context is another interesting thing that's different than local, because cloud hosted, you have the capability to really store a lot of memory and context. And your context is going to be your data, it's going to be your documents, and it's going to be your interactions. And typically those are being stored somewhere as records within your systems. So your memory and context is living within the cloud. And then lastly, I think it's important to call out that cloud hosted systems scale to your business. So inherently, they are built to be rolled out for a platform or for multi-users. So when you go and build a cloud hosted agent, that is an agent you want to see across your business.
Yeah, I think something important to call out too, and going off script a little bit here, this is something we talked about before, but I think it's really key with thinking about cloud hosted versus local, and kind of what we're seeing with what we're rolling out as well, is with cloud hosted, you kind of get, the agents are typically semi-personalized to an individual or not personalized at all, right? So maybe the personalization is like, okay, I can maybe change its personnel a little bit in a paragraph that I'm allowed to do for updating its master prompt, or maybe I have my own memory that's tied to that agent, so it remembers some things about me. But as we go to hybrid and then local agents, I think you're going to get progressively more options to have highly personalized agents to individuals, employees across your company, if you're rolling out in this company, which has some trade-offs, right? There's some real big advantages to that, and there's also some not so great advantages to that. So it's really depending on kind of your use case of what you're trying to roll out and what we look at there. So just keep that in mind. I think we'll call out as we kind of go through as well. So then moving from cloud hosted over to hybrid, kind of what are some different changes you have with a hybrid approach, and what are some considerations there?
Yeah, so when you start thinking about the hybridness of an agent rollout, right, you really start to think about what portions of my system are going to live in the cloud and what portions are going to live locally. So as you alluded to previously, local agents are typically highly customized in running on an individual's computer. So if, let's say you want that customization, but you want to be able to interact with an agent that you have running across all of your systems, or for a business unit that you have within, let's say, Agentforce as another example. There's absolutely interactions that we're seeing today with agent-to-agent communication, but I think more commonly what we see is tool overlap. Agents that are running in the cloud and agents that are running locally, one thing that is uniting them is their ability to connect to tools. So really, really powerful capabilities locally because you're able to, from your machine, interact with all of your systems. But if you want that more restricted access, you can always run those tools through your cloud-hosted agents. So we see that as well. Additionally, some familiarity that you're going to see between both cloud-hosted and local is the fact that they are agents. So at its core, they have an agentic loop. Most cloud-hosted platforms are going to really lean into this idea of it's going to retry when it fails, and you see that a lot locally with some of the development tools that local agents are built off of. But yeah, typically we see a lot more of this hybrid approach where you have your local agents working on individual computers, and then potentially you have some cloud-hosted agents that want to interact with everybody's data up in the cloud and perform some sort of action that then disperses down to those local individual agents.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the trend that we've seen internally has happened in parallel with just a push that's been happening across the entire space as well. So, 𝗵𝗵𝗋 was, the major phenomenon from back in January, where people are building these agents that are, running locally on a computer. They can be making LLM call outs to the cloud. They're calling tools in the cloud. So what we're talking about here isn't in isolation. This is really a trend that's moving across the entire space. And now just within the last couple of weeks, you saw NVIDIA kind of announce a whole new locally hosted versus or hybrid kind of architecture based with 𝗵𝗆. You saw Perplexity with Perplexity Computer that is cloud hosted, but kind of creating this hybrid version where it's running on a virtual computer somewhere else where it still can be very tailored to you. So the direction that things are going, where you're getting these highly personalized agents that are tied into a common set of tools, does seem to kind of be the direction where a lot of things are going. And frankly, a lot of enterprises are starting to look at this hybrid and local approach as well, which is something very different than even 4 to 6 months ago. So what are some of the advantages of going with like a locally based agent? So maybe you want to give some more like particular examples of like, why would it be valuable to have your knowledge vault or your memory working on your computer versus in the cloud? Like what things could it open up for businesses having that more highly personalized approach?
Right. So if I were to back up the story even half a year ago, when we talk about local agents are built most of the time, not always, but most of the time on an existing dev tool framework like Claude Code or Codex. That has been a little bit of a detriment, in my opinion, to local agents because I think businesses still view them as a dev tool, when in reality, they can be so highly customized. You have a ton of control over your context that we're seeing just at Serious way more success in local agents in areas that have nothing to do with development. We actually found that we're rolling out those local agents to the extremes of our business. So the people that are doing development, hands down code, and the people that are writing presentations, and the people that are creating communication lines and leading those efforts with emails and things of that nature. That's where we're seeing a lot of the success on both ends of that. So as you were saying, some examples that we've seen, what's the benefit of local agents? Well, first of all, the scope, I think, is the biggest one. So it's a very customizable scope, where in the cloud, you're typically going to have an agent focus on one thing, like we were just talking about. It's going to be some sort of business process aligned to closing X amount of leads per month. Where local agents, the scope is more along the lines of how can we just increase your efficiency? And that goes across every tool that individual user could be interacting with. So that's where you really start to see the power of local, because it's not specific to a line of effort, but it's specific to an individual user. Additionally, when we talk about context, so context for a cloud hosted, we talked about living in the cloud as your actual data points. Perhaps it's even saved memory. With context locally, you can, if done correctly, you can control what context each one of your interaction has with the local agent. So let's say you want to use it to write emails. You're being very specific about who you're writing the email to and all the emails that you've leveraged in the past in order to get the tone correct. That's not something that a cloud agent's going to do, right? So a local agent is going to be able to say, this is how you've written emails before. This is how you've created time entries before. This is what your presentation templates look like. Let me build one for you, right? That's what those local agents are really specialized in. So the real trick with local agents, I would say that the downside and the positive side of local agents is it's aligned to one user, one, not a business process, but to a user inherently, right? So I think there is definitely a hill that companies that are seeing success are leaning towards, which is this idea of how do we get over this hump of letting the users be successful with their local agents, but also aligning local agents to our business processes. So you kind of have a hybrid, a mix of both. And maybe that means diving into cloud hosted for some of it, that hybrid approach that we talked about previously. And maybe it's just having good business processes defined within each of your users' local agents.
Yeah, I think you had some really good call outs there. And I think the other thing to keep in mind too, what are we seeing and kind of what do we recommend to businesses too? And some type of like controlled release plan or controlled kind of DevOps process for getting locally hosted agents out. I think what we found is there's kind of a happy medium between allowing customization at the individual level on their machine versus having kind of core skills or capabilities and agent architecture that could be pushed out to people's computers. And again, I think that's something that everybody's still figuring out right now. So I don't think we have like the final end all be end recommendation there. But maybe what are some key considerations that we've kind of learned both through kind of what's worked and kind of what hasn't worked? What are some key considerations you got to keep in mind when thinking about how do I get, okay, we built this great agent that can work for an employee and they can customize it. How do we control getting it out to them, but like not have it be the Wild West where everybody's just throwing a whole bunch of skills on their own agent, making it do it their own thing and kind of just go off the deep end?
Yeah. It's kind of a loaded question. I would say it depends on a lot of your individual business needs and where you're at technically, right? So I'll say first things first with local agents, where we said months ago that the power of agents comes from your data, right? And I agree with that with cloud agents. The power of local agents comes from your processes. So if you do not have well-defined processes within your business, then you don't have anything to align your agents to. So that has been definitely a challenge for us, is having to come up and figure out, okay, if we're going to tell Claude Code to operate in this way when working with pull requests, for instance, on our Git repo, what are our rules? How do we make sure Claude is following the rules that we put in place? So those are things that are really important there. Additionally, I would say when it comes to security, local agents pose, in my opinion, a much larger risk than cloud-hosted agents. The risk is still there for cloud agents, but it's being blocked by developers, right? So the developers are in there, they're building the cloud agents. When you open up a local agent, let's say you give somebody access to Claude Code, you've kind of given them a tool that can do really powerful things. So the capabilities to add skills, they can read and write emails, exposing yourself to prompt injection, things of that nature, that becomes a big security concern. So for us, where we saw a lot of success is a controlled rollout, right? Let's figure out who our individual stakeholders, who our torchbearers are going to be for this kind of rollout. Let's define some security parameters around it. Make sure that we have processes in place to get our tools into a secure place. Make sure nothing's being stored locally. That's dangerous. We talked a little bit about this in our security podcast a few weeks ago. And additionally, it's been a lot of trial and error, but it's been let's make sure that when we roll this out, it's just as much of a change management problem as it is a technology problem. So training is key, understanding the capabilities is key, and making sure that it's done in a secure way is key.
Yep. Yeah, it's kind of a whole new way of working. If you've got a local AI agent that you're able to kind of tailor to your job within the business. Definitely the training component is massive. And so I think, kind of key takeaways. So we've kind of gone through the whole spectrum from cloud hosted to hybrid to local. Bottom line is kind of what we're seeing is businesses moving forward, you got to have a plan for both. Both locally based agents and cloud hosted agents. They both have different roles in your business for different potential use cases. But when it comes to efficiency for individuals doing their day-to-day job, if your job is to improve individual efficiency at whatever there is they're doing, a lot of the time you're going to get a lot more of an unlock. We're seeing significant levels of unlock with locally based agents compared to a cloud hosted agent. Whereas if it's a efficiency for a process specifically, cloud hosted might be, a better option there. And so I think bottom line is, don't think it's one or the other. Again, the kind of what we've said on a lot of different topics we've talked about, we think AI agents are going to be so embedded across your business, across so many different use cases. It really depends on the use case, and you're really going to have kind of both being a part of your businesses moving forward. But any final thoughts from your end, Gavin?
Yeah, I would agree 100%. You have to be thinking about both, right? If you're somebody that has a lot of SaaS platforms that you work with at your company, you're probably leaning pretty heavily on cloud-hosted AI agents. But give it not too long from now, those local agents are going to really speed other companies along and the efficiencies that they're seeing. I mean, I know me and Tim can talk about it for hours, how much efficiency we've seen using local agents. It's pretty remarkable. And I would even say, if you're somebody listening working on a smaller business, I would actually encourage looking into local agents first. If you don't have a massive SaaS platform, then definitely local agents is a great place to start, because they can connect to all of the data points wherever you're at, and you can define your business process with it. So do not underestimate the power of local agents and what they can do, especially if you have a good rollout plan for your company.
Yep, absolutely. Definitely. Very interesting topic, and I think one that we'll hear of a lot more moving forward for sure.
Is there any, I got to wonder, the companies that are bringing the technology out to us, is this an indication of what people are accepting? I know a lot of people were scared, just didn't know what to do with it in the beginning, right? Then maybe they did it, but they're still hesitant. So would a personal agent or locally hosted, is anything like that an indication that people are definitely looking into it, but they're looking to it? Trust but verify, I think, is the word we hear a lot, right? Is there any, in your opinion, is there any indication that this is a symptom of that?
I think massive. I mean, I think that's the whole reason 𝗵𝗶 became the firestorm that it was. At the number of GitHub stars that it got was faster by far than any other software ever released in the amount of time that was released. That's not just tinkers on the side, that's businesses looking into that as well. Then you see, Perplexity computer getting released. Then you see NVIDIA making some big announcements with 𝗵𝗶. Everybody now, in terms of companies, are trying to make their own version of an 𝗵𝗶 that they can release and kind of drive locally based, agents. And so, yeah, I think it's absolutely being driven by, I think the need is there. People want to be more productive. They've heard about the potential of AI agents for so long. Well, now they've seen something that kind of gives a glimpse of AI agents actually delivering on the potential that's kind of been promised. And now they're saying, how do we get this into our business? And yeah, I think that there's a reason kind of all these companies are pivoting this fast towards it. And then you see Anthropic's kind of moving this way as well, with Claude Cowork, with Dispatch for, interacting with Claude Code off your mobile phone, essentially building agent capabilities that can run off their desktop app. Everybody's moving that direction. So I think you're only going to see more of this moving forward. A, because it works, and B, there's a big appetite for it. So good question. Yeah, totally agree.
If you've got competitors that are doing it, you're going to get left behind, right? Because their productivity is going to go up. So good stuff. All right, guys. Well, another great one, definitely more than a vocabulary lesson, but I appreciate you guys pulling this together. I think the artifact makes it a lot easier, not a lot easier to understand, but easier to take it away to your troops and share it around your company. So if you've got ideas or commentary on this, please give us feedback on the episode. We'd love to hear your feedback. If you've got specific topics you want us to speak on, let us know that as well. So, Tim, Gavin, thank you again for all your time. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Greg.
Thanks for having us.
Well, that's a wrap. Thanks for spending time with us on Serious Talk Agentic AI. If today's breakdown helped you think more clearly about local versus cloud-hosted AI agents, or gave you a better way to explain it to your team, do 3 quick things for me. First, follow or subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. Second, leave a review. It seriously helps more business leaders and builders find the show. And third, share this episode with someone you know who's wrestling with AI implementation and trying to make the right architectural calls. We also drop links and resources in the show notes, including recommended content that builds on today's discussion and any companion artifacts referenced in this episode. And if you want to talk through your situation, whether you're debating cloud, hybrid, or local, reach out to us anytime at serioustalk@serioussolutions.com. The address will be in the show notes. Huge thanks again to Tim and Gavin for joining, and a special thank you to Jason Fowler for allowing us to use his song, Mystery Road. Until next time, I'm Greg Banks. Thanks for listening.